We'll wait one more minute and then I'll get started because I'm very, very happy about the news we have to announce today. So with that, I think, Schneider, if you could actually put up the agenda, that would be good. Wonderful. Could you make it bigger? These are my eyes. Thank you. Okay, so
Thank you.
Do you have anything else?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
So if you're not speaking as a speaker, if you could be, that would be great. So I'm going to do the welcome and then we'll have a UNDP update from Kazom. And as part of my update, I'm also going to actually give the ITU update. And then following that, we'll have the Partner to Connect update from Alex Wong. And Cindy will be talking, our board member, about the Cool Abilities Report, which is a new term for most people, but she will explain it. And then we have Hong Yi from Singapore talking about what's going on with open government products. And Yusuf Noel from Oslo about his amazing work in Africa. And then finally, Lynn Wells, I hope, is going to be able to join us, but if not, I will give that presentation about Puerto Rico and internet resilience. There are things that make it not possible for him to join us. So with that, I'd like to actually give the ITU update. This is a momentous time for our group. Welcome, everyone. Our group started with a meeting between then the Office of the Tech Envoy, Fabrizio Hochschild, Vince Cerf, myself, Doreen Bogdan-Martin, and Henrik Tholken, who is here with us today. That meeting took place in November of 2019. So we've come a long way. It was at the Internet Governance Forum of the at Berlin, Internet Governance Forum at Berlin. And the 4 or 5 of us met and decided that it was important to continue things in the original spirit of the internet, which is that it was fueled by people connecting to each other, not necessarily institutional connections, but person-to-person connections. So, sorry, distracted. So the person-to-person connections is what we have continued with our about 10 meetings a year. So we try to do it monthly, but we usually take a break for September when Anger is on. And then we also take another break one other time a year. So the momentous news is that Doreen Bogdan-Martin has been elected the Secretary General of the ITU. And our little group, which has always had her coming in every month or every other month, sorry, I'm so distracted by the sound. If you're not speaking, if you could mute, please, that would be very helpful. And so it's a big deal. Doreen Bogdan-Martin is ITU's Secretary General elect, and we have a chance to, engage with her every month or every other month at this forum, which is wonderful. She is the first woman elected for 157 years to that role because the ITU preceded the United Nations. And so now I'd like to actually switch to Alex Wong giving the ITU update. Yeah, it would be great if, so what happened was Alex Wong gave the update at the People-Centered Internet yesterday, and we are, not yesterday, Sunday, and we are showing a video of his update. Go ahead and start it.
Please confirm you can listen.
Yes, we can hear you. No, we can't hear you. We can't hear.
You can listen the video now?
We can't hear it. No.
Just one
Just,
second.
just keep playing it, and maybe I'll speak until you can get the sound, because
standard, definitions and metrics.
All I wanted to say on IQ, a few slides here. So we're part of the specialized agency for ICTs. Core mission is close the digital divide. That's actually in our mandate, connect the world. That's the core focus of the IQ. We have, of course, member states, the 190,
Right,
that
like we have
are also members.
for COVID or something else.
They pay units. That's how the IQ is funded. As a UN agency, countries pay into our core budget through a units system. We also have 900
And it means that
private sector, academia, organization. So most people know the IQ. I'm sure this group knows
makes a lot, brain level.
about IQ, and IQ's traditional history has been through its regulatory standard and standardization work. So that's
Think about
the Communication Bureau and the IQ Standardization Bureau. And the Development Bureau, which is the part that I'm in, which is really the part of the IQ that goes out into the field and works on projects to bridge the digital divide. That was only created 35 years ago by the member states. And so again, in the traditional history of the IQ, which has been around for almost 160 years, has been more in the radio and standardization bureau. What's interesting about the IQ, for historical reasons, is that the leadership of the IQ is elected by the member states. So there's actually 5 elected official positions: the Secretary General, the Deputy Secretary General, and each of the 3 heads of the 3 bureau who have the title as director. And so Doreen Bogdan, my boss, in 2019, she ran for and was elected by the member states as the director of the Development Bureau. And the terms are 4 years each, and then they actually run for election again. For those of you that know the IQ and have been to any of the plenipotentiary, which just took place, it's like campaigns. They have receptions, they have buttons, Doreen for Secretary General, button, balloons, there's receptions. And of course, Doreen doesn't represent Doreen Bogdan, she's representing the United States, because it's the member states that are putting the candidates up. So what happened is in the plenipotentiary, which is the conference that just took place in Bucharest, the elected officials, that's when the elections take place. So they literally have a ballot, and each country goes up and they place a vote. And just like any election, there has to be an outright majority, and there can be multiple rounds as candidates are slimmed down. And the 5 elected officials, 4 of them were elected. One was a continuation of last term where nobody ran against Mario, who's the head of one of the existing bureau. But the other 4 positions, Secretary General, Deputy Secretary General, the head of the development sector, and now I should know this, whether it's standardization or radio, someone else might know better. One of the other director positions, I think it's the Standardization Bureau. They all had elections, and Doreen, who, as I mentioned, was the Development Bureau head, ran for the Secretary General, and she got elected. And her only other candidate, the only other candidate that was running against her was a candidate from Russia. So it was very interesting, this whole US-Russia dynamic. And then the Development Bureau, which is the group that Doreen will be heading until the end of the year. January 1st is when she takes office as the Secretary General. The winner of that is a guy from Zimbabwe, Cosmos Zavazava. So he's now the new, he'll be taking over the head of the Development Bureau as of January 1st. So I'll stop, and then, yeah, I think I'll stop there. Then of course, Geneva is the headquarters for the IQ. So I just thought maybe that quick recap for those of you that
Thank you. Please stop the video. Okay, everyone. I wanted to call on one of the co-founders of this group, Digital Cooperation Diplomacy, Henrik Thulken. He was digital and climate envoy for Germany, but I'd like to ask him to make a few remarks, given this momentous day of one of our founding members becoming elected ITU Secretary General. Henrik, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mylene. First of all, of course, it's a wonderful incident that one of the core members got promoted or will be promoted to such a prestigious and very important posting. And I'm sure she will help us driving forward this idea of digital diplomacy and cooperation, also with a developmental perspective. As you mentioned, I was the first digital ambassador of Germany, first digital ambassador, and then later on climate and energy envoy. It was not really at the same time, but subsequently. And I just last week took a sabbatical from the Federal Foreign Office and I joined Capgemini, the French tech and consultant company, as vice president for strategy in the global public sector. And I'm looking at the same issues, digital transformation and sustainability and climate. And I would be very happy to contribute to this group also from my new position. And I'm sure there's a lot that we can benefit from each other and we can drive forward a discussion on these key topics. Thank you, Mylene.
Thank you, Henrik. And thank you for your support over all of these years. It's been wonderful.
And by the way, we should start celebrating birthdays for this group, perhaps, Mylene.
Yes, so November will be our third birthday. Okay, our next speaker is Kezom Mazali from the UNDP, and she will be speaking about the UNGA 77 side event hosted by UNDP and the Secretariat on Digital Public Infrastructure. We're also looking forward to an update on the wider digital public infrastructure and digital public good activities. So Kezom, please go ahead. Welcome.
Hi, Maylene and colleagues. Thank you so much for having us here, and big congratulations to our ITU colleagues and for Doreen. We are thrilled because we have been working together as one UN in moving this agenda forward of inclusive digital transformation as well as inclusive digital public infrastructure. And, you know, to all of you, you can imagine a world where, you know, countries across sectors, including, are building digital public infrastructure at scale. But imagine if they are not built with the right safeguards, with the right accountability frameworks, with the right capacities. That world is a dangerous world. So there's a tremendous role for multilateral systems as well as groups like ours here to play in terms of really driving that agenda forward in a meaningful way. My goal here was today to give you a bit of a update or share back from the 77th UN General Assembly's digital moment on digital public infrastructure, which, as the Secretary General noted, was setting in place some of the building blocks around digital cooperation and where that needs to go towards inclusive digital public infrastructure. Some key highlights just to note is that we had countries around the world committed to sharing digital public goods and best practices that will contribute to achieving our sustainable development goals. We had funders starting to already commit with about $295 million committed to advance inclusive digital public infrastructure, and that cuts across themes such as capacity building to governance to climate stacks. This event, as Maylene noted, was co-convened by the UN agencies, a number of us along with the World Bank, the Gates Foundation, the government of Germany, Estonia, and many others, which marked a significant first gathering of countries to really advance the development and the use of DPIs much more responsibly. I also encourage you to browse through the proceeding of the key recommendations. I will post a link in our chat shortly, where you will see the key commitments from the European Union to the African Union for cross-border trade to countries like India and Singapore, and also small island nation states such as Timor-Leste, where the president made some very important remarks about the linkages to the blue economy and the data exchanges required to really achieve the climate promise as we all prepare for the upcoming COP27. Of course, as UNDP, along with our partners, we continue to lead the global multi-stakeholder endeavor to provide an actionable framework for countries to make their DPIs much more inclusive and safe. And this includes engaging with experienced and emerging leaders from countries' governments, from civil society, from development institutions, academia, and the private sector to create an actionable framework for how countries can adopt, deploy, and shorten the learning curve for putting in place the inclusive, safe, and equitable technologies. I believe, that we are at a milestone moment here as countries accelerate to the adoption of new technology. The decisions that they make today is going to have serious and lasting implications for the welfare of people across the planet, for democracy and for sovereignty. And therefore, the time is really now for much more actionable guidance, and therefore thrilled to be talking about it in this forum, as well as working collaboratively with the member states and other partners. One of the key follow-up items is the partnership that we have with the G20, especially as India takes up this presidency and prioritizes this inclusive digital public infrastructure agenda that cuts across the status quo working groups that are generally part of the G20, and really looking to put in place some of the global principles for digital and data governance and extend the role of digital public infrastructure beyond the foundational stack of payments and identity to look at climate data exchanges, access to justice, digital commerce, and a number of other thematic areas such as social protection. In particular, this is sort of just a brief update really for this group, but in particular, I would love to hear from all of you on what is the role that private sector, whether it's big tech or emerging tech companies, can play in really participating as an industry or as an ecosystem towards this agenda. Would love to hear from you today, but also please reach out to me and I will drop my email address as well in the chat. With this, back to you, Maylene, and thank you for having us here.
Thank you, Kezom. We have a few private sector players on, and so if anybody would like to make some comments, but I'd like to first call on Dorothy, who made a comment in the chat. Dorothy is from Ghana, and she Dorothy, are you able to speak? While we're waiting for Dorothy,
I can speak.
Okay, go ahead, Dorothy.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm speaking to you from somewhere in Indonesia, and my bandwidth is not that great. Yeah, I really enjoyed that presentation, Kezom. Very interesting, and I'm sure you are also part of the event that UNESCO is organizing in February around democracy and all those issues that relate to bringing the next billions on board and making sure that as they come on board, they're adequately prepared for the new environment that they're going to be facing. And I continue to be involved with many different initiatives where private sector is taking the lead, and the focus is exclusively, one could say, on infrastructure without looking at issues such as media and information literacy that are so important if those the people who are coming on board for the first time are to understand the implications. So I was very happy to listen to you. I think that at my impression, and I would like to get the feedback from others on this call, is my impression is in many of the top digital, the big players, let's put it diplomatically, We have one section which is in charge of core business and which would focus on infrastructure. And then we have a far less powerful part of the organization that focuses on these type of developmental issues. And so there's an imbalance as they're moving forward. What we want to happen is that there should be a greater balance within these tech companies, that they recognize that this is core to their growth. I don't know if Kesali wants to comment or anyone else, but so far I've not been too
Thank
impressed.
you, Dorothy. Kizam, would you like to come in?
Sorry, I was responding also to a question in the chat.
Yes.
Lots always happening on this group, but I welcome other colleagues. I know that many of us are involved on this agenda to take the floor first, and then for me to come in.
Great. Matthew, did you
May
want
I add in, Malin? So
Yes.
for those of you who don't know me, my name is Matthew Perrin, and I am one of the product directors at Salesforce, which is a cloud-backed software organization that provides software services to both business-to-business contexts as well as business-to-consumer contexts. Multi-billion-dollar organization with operations in 100 plus countries around the world. The role I'm specifically serving, and this goes to Dorothy's kind of assertion, like that there are parts of the core business that aren't connected to these digital public goods and aren't as focused on these types of ideas. I want to say that there are some organizations like Salesforce who are values driven, who have put the success of our core business in line with the success of these digital public goods and the stakeholders, multi-stakeholder dialogues ultimately that we're trying to create, right? Salesforce historically has basically positioned itself and said, we won't be as successful in our marketplace if all of our stakeholders are not as successful. That's in part why you see one of our co-founders, Mark, he does so much in terms of the 1 trillion trees initiatives. He does so much in terms of like the World Economic Forum, is deeply engaged in those kind of activities because he sees them directly in line with us and our ability to succeed as a business. So reflecting back on like the question of like, what does this dialogue look like? I think it's actually probably two pieces. One, it is trying to understand what is actually needed from these public sector entities. I was in Brussels 3 weeks ago, meeting with the head of their cloud unit for the commission. And we were very much trying to understand what are the goals of the commission, what are the goals of the European Union member states in terms of this space. And then we're trying to take that back and understand how does that reflect our core business. At the second point, I think there's also a forward-looking kind of education piece. So we see our responsibility as educating a lot of the regulatory authorities, as well as public sector or even nonprofit sector entities who are engaged in this space, trying to educate them on the state of technology that exists today and making sure that we can have a cohesive discussion about real technologies and the real state of where organizations exist. So we're not talking past each other. I mean, I've been grateful to be part of this organization for probably over a year now. And many times, this is the only space where I see us actually having conversations that are hitting each other and actually in a forum where I can say, here's what we're talking about from an actual technology point of view, where technology is running, what kind of workloads are able to surface, as well as we're talking about, okay, what do people actually need in order for them to flourish and achieve like UN development goals and the like. So I think it's these kind of forums where we have the back and forth of trying to understand, okay, what does the public sector ultimately want? What do these nonprofit organizations want? And then the share back of, okay, here's where we are right now as an organization and the types of things that we can do. I mean, and so it's very much, at least for our organization, my business, very much core to our business to have that exchange. And so I want to just like present that as the feedback to you, Kizam, and say like, this is where we stand as an organization on many of these questions, and basically say that if you look at the history of our work with Mei Lin and others in this space, you should see a long track record of trying to be deeply engaged in this and really trying to reflect our business objectives accordingly.
Thank you, Matthew. I think we need to move on after Kezom's response.
Sure. And Dorothy, thanks for that excellent question, as well as Matthew for the inputs. Something that I reflected a lot on over the last couple of weeks was that as we engage with countries, we were not engaging with the Minister of Rwanda to talk about Rwanda. We were not engaging with the Minister of Sierra Leone or Senegal to talk just about Sierra Leone or Senegal. We were actually inviting countries to talk about what is this new global digital architecture and what should it look like and how will they contribute to it. And this is, I think, a very significant shift that we're seeing emerge in a digital first world, which is also bringing to the front line some of the key questions around the role of multilaterals, in how we are organized, what things we focus on, in ensuring that, we have, the frameworks or equivalent of the Human Rights Declaration in place for, things to do with digital access, digital rights, safeguards and security of people. So these are, many, many questions that UNDP alone is not thinking about, but certainly we see much significant alignment with the rest of the UN system, with the World Bank, with bilaterals, countries. And where I would love to do more thinking is with the private sector. Of course, we have, emerging companies like Paystack, etc., in serving the sub-Saharan region in Africa, but also just thinking more about, people, companies like Google and Facebook, and whether they build on top of DPIs or whether they contribute to DPIs development. How do you ensure adjacent pools of, expertise and services that help the public sector? What does, local digital ecosystem strengthening look like? And what are the conditions in place, for engaging them in the development of DPIs in countries? So just a lot of questions, but thank you for this short discussion, Mei Lin and colleagues.
You're welcome. We're glad to have it. It is exactly this kind of discussion that this informal group is for, because very often when the private sector is invited to UN meetings, it's a very formal interchange. But it was Vince Cerf's conviction and advice to us that we have this sort of ongoing side event that I could invite the private sector. We've heard from Microsoft and others, as well as Matthew in the past, and we'll continue to do so. We are going to move on to our next topic, which is really an update from the ITU on the Partner to Connect initiative. Partner to Connect is where everyone, both private sector, public sector, and countries, are making pledges related to connectivity. It's been a major program of the ITU Development Bureau, and we'll be hearing from Alex again. Please, Alex, go ahead.
Okay, so P2C, let me start with then a quick couple slides, and then I'm going to try to play a video. I don't know if that's going to work or not, because, but we'll give it a shot. So Partner to Connect. So I'm going to take about 15 to 20 minutes to provide an overview of Partner to Connect. Again, some of you may have seen bits of this before. So let me just start with that we began Partner to Connect in September 2021. We always refer to the resolutions because for many member states, they ask ITU or they challenge the ITU on why you're doing certain activities. So for Partner to Connect, we began that in September 2021. And on the left-hand side, we referred to a resolution, Resolution 71, where ITU has been mandated to basically build partnerships. And the right-hand side of the page now reflects what was an outcome in June at the WTDC, where now Partner to Connect has been turned into a resolution and endorsed by the member states. And so now ITU has a mandate to do Partner to Connect, which for the UN world, that's super exciting. So what is Partner to Connect? When we began this in 2021, we basically felt that that there was this incredible opportunity to create a platform where we could mobilize through pledges, commitments to closing the digital divide. And so Partner to Connect is essentially a pledging platform. And we actually say it was the first UN's first pledging platform for connectivity. And we opened up this platform and we basically said to all of our stakeholders, member states, governments, which are the governments, the private sector, academia, if you're doing something on connectivity, please enter this as a pledge. And so that's how it really began. Let me now try to play the video, which kind of gives you a bit of an update on where we are now. So bear with me here to see if I can get this to work. So hold on a second. All right. I don't, if the audio doesn't work, I'll just stop. But anyhow, let's give it a shot to see if it works. Okay.
Despite 30 years.
Can people hear that, by the way, and see it?
We can hear the audio, but this video does not seem to be what you want us to show.
Okay, hold on. Let's see if I can get this going. Does the video show up now?
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
Yes, much
let me
better.
Start again. Great. Okay.
Despite 30 years of steady growth, today billions of people remain offline and hundreds of millions more still lack the connectivity required to tap onto the transformative power of the internet. The Partner to Connect Digital Coalition, launched by ITU in collaboration with the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Technology and the UN OHRLLS, is set to change this paradigm by mobilizing resources, partnerships, and commitments to achieve universal and meaningful connectivity. To date, hundreds of pledges worth billions of dollars have been submitted through the P2C platform by entities from all around the world. But the coalition's work doesn't stop here. In fact, it is just getting started. Empowered by the 2 new resolutions on P2C and digital transformation adopted in Kigali at the 2022 World Telecommunication Development Conference, Partner to Connect will scale pledges, track progress on implementation, and mobilize more resources and partnerships. P2C will also be working with partner countries to facilitate the implementation of the P2C Action Framework and the P2C pledges to accelerate digital transformation at the national level. Find out more. Join Partner to Connect. Make a pledge for any of the focus areas of the coalition and help us come closer to our goal of a meaningfully connected planet. Visit www.itu.int/partner to connect.
Okay. So that video was made in September. So it's only a month old. And we're already actually, since September, we're now at around 520 pledges, valued over $28.5 billion. So that's kind of gone up there for a bit since the video was made, where I think we were still under 500. Okay, so everyone can see my screen, I hope, the slides. So I mentioned what the objective is. Again, we launched this closely within the UN system with the Office of the Secretary General's Ongoing Technology, and also with some of the other key UN agencies. And in fact, we had many UN agencies serve in leadership roles. And so we organized through a multi-stakeholder platform that began in September 2021. We had group conference calls. We basically put together this framework, which is what you now see as the 4 focus areas: access, adoption, value creation, accelerate. Each of the focus areas, we had leaders. Typically, it was a CEO from a business, a head of a UN agency, a minister, a youth leader, and a head of an NGO or a foundation. So for Access, Nick Reed from Vodafone, Pamela Cook-Anderson from ITC, Minister Ursula from Ghana, Mbato from as a youth leader, and the interim head of World Wide Web Foundation, for example. So we organized it this way because we wanted the Partner to Connect coalition to be really led by the stakeholders, not by the ITU. We wanted to facilitate this. And over the course of between September 2021 until around March 2022, we created what became what we call the action framework. So we had these 4 focus areas, and really what that action framework was meant was to provide a framework so people could make a pledge. So you right now could go onto the ITU Partner to Connect website, you could enter a pledge, because I'm sure all of you are doing something tied to connectivity. We further said that there's 4 kinds of pledges. One could be tied to a program that you have, a programmatic pledge. The second type could be a policy pledge. So if you're a government and you wanted to pledge a commitment to a spectrum policy, you could make that your pledge. It could be an advocacy pledge. So this could be a pledge where you're pledging to promote the challenges tied to connectivity. And then finally, it could be a financial pledge, which could be something that you're committing financially. And this pledging framework, so you can sort of see a bit of the detail. We opened that up in March of 2022, and it culminated with what we called the Partner Connect Roundtable that took place in Kigali in June of 2022 at our WTDC. So you can see the photos here of the different, the audience. But over the course of 2.5 days, again, we call it the first UN Pledging Conference for Connectivity. We basically had essentially 10 panels of 15, on average 15 people each. Nelly, by the way, Maylin also was on making a pledge on behalf of a government of Estonia, as an example. And what was really important was we weren't asking organizations to do something new. We said to a lot of organizations, you're already committing to doing something. It could be as a business, you could be committing already to doing some kind of a capital expenditure. So like, for example, Orange, their pledge valued at 5.6 billion euro was around building out infrastructure in the Middle East Africa region. By no means was this something they had to cook out of the air. I'm sure I'm sure it's part of their business plan. We said pledge it and announce that you're doing this. And by the way, you're going to be held accountable to it. So the fine print of Partner to Connect is that when you enter a pledge, you're going to ask to self-monitor and self-track on where you are, so we can also then report back on progress. So here are some of the examples of pledges. Orange, I mentioned, Inmarsat made a pledge tied to satellite airtime during disasters. Convergence Partners, which is a technology investor based in South Africa, they made a pledge tied to a new fund that they were going to be launching or have just launched. Kenya made a pledge tied to infrastructure, connectivity services, and capacity building. Microsoft, Cisco, Roden Schwartz, Verizon, BBVA, they all made pledges tied to skills training and building up entrepreneurs in the case of BBVA. And another example of Uganda making a pledge tied to skilling. So I think what became, I guess I won't say, I guess we were also, I personally also thought it was great that we were able to get so many pledges because we didn't know how the market would respond. But I think what it really shows is, people are welcoming this chance to announce what they're doing. And of course, for the ITU, we also want to give visibility and write stories about what people are doing and report back. What was really good was that member states really jumped all over this. And in fact, I'd say about half of the pledges that have been made are coming from member states, where they're making a pledge tied to a policy, typically that they're planning to do, or what they want to do as part of their strategic plan. Again, a lot of this is nothing new. We're just giving a space for organizations to announce that. And as mentioned during the video, and also I mentioned earlier, so with the mandate for Partner to Connect now endorsed through a new resolution in June, and also tying to a mandate that the ITU received related to helping countries advance digital transformation, which is this bottom half, we now have a very clear path of what we want to do going forward. We want to continue, therefore, to mobilize more pledges. We're not stopping. So we're now over 500 pledges, as I mentioned earlier. Membership has asked the ITU to have regular reporting on where is the implementation of the pledges. So we're going to have our first, what we're calling the annual reporting meeting that will take place in Geneva on December 8th. You're all invited. There'll be a physical and hybrid session. Maylin, you mentioned the work PCI is doing on the gender. In fact, we're going to tie this event with our Equals Awards, the Equals Tech Awards. We're going to hold them at the same date so we get some additional synergy. And then the last part here is we're going to go ahead and take the Partner to Connect model down to a handful of countries, what we're calling partner countries. The Cambodia is the first partner country. And so what we're doing here with this is under the leadership of the national government, typically the Ministry of Telecoms or ICT and the regulator, which is the ITU's core constituent, we're saying to them, how can ITU and Partner to Connect now help you advance on your national digital transformation strategy? And we're using the analysis of where that country sits, finding the gaps, and then we want to bring pledges to help fill those gaps. So this is really a platform play. It's not ITU doing its own direct technical assistance. We now want to actually bring in our own assistance, of course, as ITU. We do have some technical assistance, but also open it up to bring pledgers to the country who can then actually contribute. So again, for Maylin, you know, this is very much like the Internet for All model that we use at the World Economic Forum, but I have to say it's been really well received by the member states here in terms of P2C. We plan to have 5 countries going by the end of the year. So like I mentioned, Cambodia is the first one. I'll just really quickly give you a little more example of how it works at the country level. So this is a whole separate topic on its own, the ITU or the BDT approach to digital transformation, where we have this framework tied to access, adoption, value creation, which are aligned, as you will recall, to the Partner to Connect focus areas. And what we are doing is we've taken this framework and we've identified and allocated indicators to measure where a country is against the DT journey at the national level. 206 indicators are being used against each of these 10 building blocks. And you can essentially take a diagnostic approach. I'll skip through this, is a pretty complicated slide, but we can basically take, as an example of Mauritania, we can look at where they currently are in the DT wheel based on the data that we have. So here, what this slide shows is that Mauritania is quite strong on the institutional arrangements. For example, how the ministry is organized. In fact, Mauritania has a Ministry of Digital Transformation. And they're not too bad on cybersecurity, but they still have huge gaps overall in connectivity. For example, we're also missing data on skills and inclusion. But the idea here is that if we can take the pledges that have been made to Mauritania, and in the case of Mauritania, the government themselves made 16 pledges, which is great because it helps highlight their priorities and where they're committing to really focus. But if we now map the other pledges that have been made in Partner to Connect, that have been made to either Mauritania directly or to the region, you can start coming up with this analysis where if you can bring those pledges down, this is purely illustrative, through Partner to Connect, you can help bring these other resources to help fill some of the gaps. So this is kind of really a different way to approach how the ITU wants to work with member states. In the old days, or the traditional way, is the ITU would work with the country and deliver perhaps one intervention, because that's quite a limited budget that we have, to maybe do a cybersecurity training. Now what we want to do is work as a platform as part of the UN system, and then bring other pledges in to help fill in the gaps. And then the ITU and the UN becomes more of a platform to bring in the other engagements. So that's it. I'm going to stop there in terms of the overview of where we are so far with Partner to Connect and what we're.
Great, thank you. Sorry to cut him off halfway. I'm very pleased because we've got a representative from Giga, Maya, who Giga, she will explain what Giga is. It's very connected to Partner to Connect. Maya, please go ahead.
Thanks so much, Maylin, for allowing me to do this impromptu update on Giga. Let me just check whether everybody can hear me well.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. So I'll just use an existing deck that we have created for the October, let's say, refresh of our key stats. I hope this is visible. I'll use this as a basis to give you a rundown of where Giga currently is. It's also great to see Alex on this call. He is Krista Fabian's counterpart in Giga. He's the co-lead on the ITU side. Obviously, you probably already know, but I feel obliged to tell you what Giga is and how we work. It's a joint UNICEF ITU initiative that aims to connect every school in the world to the internet by 2030. And we really only do three major things. We try to map every school in the world on an open source digital public good platform that is called Project Connect. We then help countries who commit to universal school connectivity to define the financing stacks needed to connect these schools. It's a high value proposition, but we believe the financing is out there. It's just not harmonized. There aren't enough synergies there. And then we also support governments in connecting schools by using the best possible technical solutions. There's a lot of data rigging and analysis of available infrastructure maps and experimentation with innovative technology tools for connectivity. So this slide with figures, I hope will bring it more to life. On the right-hand side, you see a map of the world where we have marked the countries that we are currently active in. So we have 19 priority countries where we provide some level of support, and where we work at the behest of the head of state or head of government, with very tangible collaborations with ministries of education and ministries of ICT, or however the nomenclature may be in a given country. We have sort of three groups of countries. Some of them are in their early stages, others are more in their intermediate in their pursuit of universal school connectivity, and there are a few who are front runners. And I heard Rwanda being mentioned. Rwanda is one of those front runner countries. We have mapped over 1 million schools. We see this as a highly relevant piece of work because no one actually knows how many schools there are in the world, and no one knows where they are. So we're solving that information gap. Are the slides visible?
Yes, they are. They are.
Okay.
Yes, they are. Sorry, it was my mistake with the double window.
Okay. So we've mapped 1.1 million schools. We have connected over 5,000 schools, and we have connected over 2 million students and teachers to the internet for the first time with the support of 16 partners, mostly from the private sector. But I should also announce, I don't know if it was shared in this forum, that we also were lucky enough to secure the endorsement, financial backing, and political clout by the governments of Spain and Switzerland. So we as the Giga team, joint team of UNICEF and ITU, will be setting up a management sort of hub in Geneva and the technology hub in Barcelona. That will put us in a beautiful position to accelerate our operation and to have more technology tools that we can deploy in countries that wish to pursue universal school connectivity and do it in a data informed and open source manner. So this is our expected growth strategy or growth scenario for next year. We do expect a 10x growth. But please don't hold me accountable for this. If in 1 year we say we didn't manage, but we aim high to connect more than 30,000 schools directly with direct attribution to Giga and to connect over 15 million students. For that to happen, we'll have to expand the scope of countries that we are active in or providing support to. This year's General Assembly of the United Nations and the Transforming Education Summit were particularly relevant for us. Some commitments, very tangible ones, were made there. So we're expected to double the number of countries that we are active in. And that's going to be our goal, again, for the joint UNICEF and ITU team for 2023. We sort of have now entered from a technology exploration phase. We're more now in the technology deployment phase. Technology can act as an equalizer of opportunities It can accelerate some processes. It can create efficiencies. So that's what we will be doing in 2023 and onwards. Let me, I don't have a lot of time. Maylin has been gracious, but I don't want to abuse that. Let me also maybe spend some time precisely on those technology tools that we have in the works that we will begin deploying at scale in our countries of focus. So let me start from the left top corner, real-time connectivity status. It's a way for us to assess whether a school that is connected to the internet is actually receiving that connectivity as a service. So it's a technology-enabled way to check whether your internet service provider is really providing you that service. There are a few methods to measure that in real time in connected schools and facilities. One of them is through a web browser, but we have actually enhanced that, and we now have an application that can be run in schools. For example, in Brazil, there are 45,000 schools that send us things every 4 hours, so we can actually track in real time whether there is connectivity. That's important. That links to the bottom right-hand corner where we say gig account. Gig account is a name for a platform that we are building that allows to automatically manage contracts with service providers and pay providers for services rendered. So imagine there's a batch of 1,000 schools, let's say, connected in Rwanda by a government procurement process with a development bank, let's say. We install the application sends in real time information on that connectivity being provided by the service provider. If the service provider doesn't deliver on the agreed speed and quality listed in the service level agreement, the gig account platform can delay payments for that month or for a longer period of time. So you automate, we are in a position to automate contracts monitoring and contracts execution. We eliminate the room for human error. We obviously increase accountability and transparency exponentially. There's little to no room for siphoning out resources. So that's how real-time connectivity monitoring links to the contracts management platform that we have dubbed Gig Accounts. We're also investing heavily in infrastructure analysis. This is actually ITU's forte. They are contributing with very detailed analysis of existing infrastructure capabilities such as fiber routes, and we are able to assess, estimate costs to connect schools using various technology options. So it doesn't always have to be fiber, but it could be a mix of technologies suitable for that country's terrain, regulatory conditions, so on and so forth. Connectivity credits, it's the bottom left corner. It's a way to incentivize service providers to connect schools that are perhaps in more difficult to connect areas, rural, mountainous terrains. It's a way to offer, it's modeled based on the carbon credits, and it's supposed to create incentives. And for this prototype to work, we would need to have high engagement of national stakeholders and some kind of a platform where you can actually be awarded those credits and you have something to exchange them for. I'll stop here only because I see some questions in the chat. So Maylin, do let me know if you wish to me to answer some of these questions, or
Actually, if you could just answer them in the chat, Maria,
sure,
because we have
sure.
to back to our agenda. And
sure.
I would like to schedule a proper Giga update, not just the spontaneous one, in November or December. So I hope you or Chris Fabian would be able to do that. With
Sure.
that, we now need to move on to our next speaker, Cindy Kuhn, who is with Applied Futures Lab, and she's also a board member of the People-Centered Internet. And she's here to talk about the Cool Abilities report. And you might wonder, what is Cool Abilities? Cindy's going to tell you. Over to you, Cindy.
Thank you, Maylin, and thanks for having me here today. And I just want to open with my gratitude for everyone around the world who is working on connectivity. I live in an extremely rural place, and today I don't have connectivity, so I had to go somewhere to be with you. So I am living in the space of the challenge of the work that's ahead of all of us. So I'm grateful for the whole globe. And with that, I'm going to share screen. Okay. It's just
Cindy lives in Arizona, so she's not.
New Mexico.
Mexico, okay.
Okay, so it's saying there's a system preference disconnect with your. I might not be able to share, so let me just.
Schneider, do you have her slides? Just checking.
No, he doesn't.
No. Okay.
No.
Okay. Let me just talk it through, and then what I'll do is I'll share the slides. And actually what I'll do right now is I have the chat ready with all my goodies. So I'll send that out right now. And then the report that I was gonna, that is just, it's pictures of the report. We can all look at it together. That link that says right on top the report. So let me just walk you through it. So future casting is the practice that I do. And so I'm going to walk you through that. But first, let me start with what is Cool Abilities? And then I'll get you to why are we here today and how did all this come to be? So Cool Abilities is it's traditionally seen as disabilities or oddities or things we see in our fellow humans that visually or verbally when we connect or audio are not the same as everyone else is living in. So it's an overall name that takes what we formerly thought of as disabilities and turns that into the concept of enhanced abilities on those disabling conditions. Excuse me, let me take a drink. So Cool Abilities, it's not an isolated phenomenon in a general principle. It's really applied to a variable extent across wider range of conditions. So let me explain what that means. What it means is not everyone on the autism spectrum, as an example, has a cool ability. So it's important that we think about sometimes, oh, look at that. Schneider's the best. So Schneider, if you want to click through, that's what we're looking at. Yeah. Oh, this is, look how easy this technology is. Thank you. So keep going and I'll tell you when to stop where I'm at right now. This is great. So what you're scrolling through right now is the participants. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Lots of pictures. Okay, you can stop right there for a minute because I'm going to jump into that. So first I'll talk about, let me finish up on the Cool Abilities piece. So the important piece, because this actually isn't in the report, and this piece is important to say that when Vint Cerf and David Norsford came up with the I4J community, brought them together. Their first effort and exercise was really around looking at workforce and those with special and unique differences. How might we take our existing workforce and make it more impactful? So as many of you know, Vint is hearing impaired. And so how does he use that to his advantage? And that's what began this journey around cool abilities. And so it's important just to note, not everyone with differences, what we traditionally call disabilities, have these skills and uniqueness. So there's 3 different kind of cool abilities. And I actually realized if you want to scroll down, Schneider, there's actually this, keep going. There's keep going. If you keep looking and you see definition of cool abilities, everyone can look along. I've sort of moved things around. So there's 3 differences in cool abilities that are important just to note. And they are, as Schneider's scrolling, we'll come across them, but there's contextual cool abilities. You can leave it right there, actually. Leave it right there, and I'll start to walk through these. So there's contextual cool abilities, which really is a trait that is disabling in one context, usually in sort of the environmental space someone's in, but it becomes completely non-significant in another. So there are many examples of when put together individuals, let's say all hearing impaired together, working on a unique project. Together, they're stronger in this unique ability. That's contextual. So the next one is singular cool abilities. And that's an ability that just doesn't exist in other people, such as unique abilities to perceive things, to act as ways that would be unimaginable to others. So there are many with unique abilities partnered with their disability. That stands out. And then you have compensational abilities. And this is where one or more ability is strengthened by that of another. So because you have a disability, it then lifts other strengths that you have. And so that's an example of someone with a formerly disabling condition such as dyslexia or hyperlexia. Out in the environment, it's more challenging, but if we harness the skills and the tools on how they function and learn, it becomes an enhanced strength. So those are the type of cool abilities. And you're good, Schneider. Thank you for moving around. So let me talk a little bit now before I jump right into the report on what is future casting. And actually, Schneider, if you want to go all the way back up to that original image, that's the right there. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit right now, so you know how we got to the report and the end game. So future casting and threat casting are what I do. It's a social science practice that creates effects-based models that allow you to look as far into the future as you are desiring. Generally, we look about 10 years into the future, and that's because the humans can imagine themselves a decade ago and a decade out, but they have trouble beyond 10 years and quickly move to flying cars. So we keep them at about 10 years. And that allows us to use imagination, narrative, subject matter experts, all combined together to look at the data we've pulled in. So that's what then moves us into this image that you're looking at here. So our methodology, there's an arc that runs across the top. And actually, if you scroll down, you can see the other half of it for a moment. There you go. So this arc is our methodology. So we use a series of foresight tools put together to create a future casting experience. Those tools allow us to use several different kind of inputs. That's the arc that runs across the top. So when you take a look at this report, you'll see it running across from the right to the left or the left to the right, depending on what your image is. And what we're doing there is that's where we're collecting all of the data. That's the social science component of this work. We're pulling in all of these unique pieces. Then we're getting over to the vision. And this is where it's really important. And this is where, as a team with PCI and the Global Help Desk and the partners who came together on this, we had 30 individuals work on this together from around the world virtually for a couple of months. And what we were able to do was take the collected data, that's what we do at our lab, this top arching. But then it's really important to say, well, how will this report be used? And what is the research question? That's really the heart of where we begin. What are we asking? What are we going to look into the future together? And for that, we build a real constellation. We pull together several unique questions. So what you see is a way to bring in lots of different data around this constellation of questions. So for this report, we looked at a constellation around the future of technology, human ability, and economic value. And so with that, we brought in experts on video. We really synthesized that data with the partners playing along. So this exercise is vital to humans. It requires absolute diversity of all forms, thought, background. You can imagine if you were in an organization where people went to similar schools, they have similar backgrounds, they're going to have very similar thought. So future casting requires that we bring in diversity for everyone to bring their unique lens. So what we do after we sift through the data then is we have workbooks that we've constructed. And all of this again is in the report that you can see. And these workbooks allow the participants who are a part of the exercise to build a very specific person in a place experiencing an event. So in this case, we put all of the teams, we create small teams. So you're working together with 3 or 4 people as you're constructing this person in this place. But we force everyone to push outside of their shoes. And so you want to build someone that is not modeled after you. So I actually, since our friend Lynn Wells is not able to join us likely today, I actually want to read a really quick quote from him because he participated in this exercise. It's in the book, yeah. And it's really wonderful, that quote right there. So one of the most interesting, thought-provoking, and insightful aspects of the Cool Abilities exercise was the insistence that we move far outside our comfort zones to examine today's disabilities and future cool abilities from very different ethnic, cultural, gender perspectives. In the case of the white males on the small team, that's what he's talking about, playing the role of an autistic African girl in a refugee camp led us to think about issues, opportunities, and limitations beyond anything we would have considered on our own. This is a remarkable learning experience. That is just such an important quote because that brings together what we do. And what we did for this exercise was we asked everyone, as I said, to step out completely and build something. And what happens when Lynn's team built that young girl in this refugee camp? It allowed their team to step into welling empathy. So what this does is it lets, no matter who you are and what your background is, because you're going to be put in a team that you're each going to give each other a different lens, it allows the construction of really unique empathy maps that have real people. It feels real. And so then what we do is after we create this person we're all really passionate about and we care about, Then we turn it and we become the adversary, which could be a threat actor, a competitor. And we have such empathy at this point for this person we've built. When this actor then comes to harm the life of the person we have constructed, we're really invested in making sure it doesn't happen. So that's when you get to the graph that's in there, the bottom line that runs backwards, that's backcasting. So that's again a foresight tool put into this future casting model. And we work backwards from the 10-year out position, if that's what we're working on, or 5 or 20, in this case 10. And by working backwards, we figure out how to do one of two things. If we're threat casting, we're looking how to disrupt, mitigate, or potentially recover from the threat that has occurred. If we are future casting, we're looking how to enable the opportunity we desire. And what we do in that backcasting is we have what we call flags and gates throughout the markers of 8-year, 6-year, 4-year, 2-year. So as we're going along, we're able to watch and witness if flags and gates are happening. And I'll just explain that super quick. I have a great way of describing what are flags and gates in future casting and threat casting. It looks like this. We're all sitting around a campfire. The wind starts to blow. We look up at the flagpole that's just above us, and the wind is whipping so hard that the flag blows off and poof, lands in the fire that we're all seated around. There's nothing we can do. The flag burnt up, but we have the knowledge that that flag has dropped, and that's very meaningful because in this backcasting, when that flag drops, we have an indicator of what might be coming next. What should we be considering? So we can't do anything at that point, but we know more's coming and we better get really serious. The gate, the wind blows again, we can rush over to the gate and we can either close it tight so nothing comes out, or we can shove it open with the intention of letting movement happen. So all of those things are set in place, which you can see in this report, allowing us to really get a sense of what to expect. So that is our process, our methodology. And now I'll share with you, what did we figure out around cool abilities through this exercise? All right. So yeah, I'll just chat and tell you. So that report is there for everyone to take a look at and enjoy. Sorry for my technology, but
Cindy,
yes.
we need to wrap up. Do you have any
Great.
concluding remarks?
Yes. Let me say this. So the thing we learned is through this report is in the coming decades, the constellation of emerging technologies will completely enable a radical reevaluation of human labor. And this requires radical increased participation in global workforce. So what we really saw here is disabling conditions will become the gift to humanity of showing us the way of totally rethinking workforce. And that's what we really discovered in this report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. We're very, very proud of the report. It's one of the areas of focus for the people-centered internet. If we're people-centered, we should count all people, including people with what people consider disabilities, which in fact could be augmented by digital technology to make them superhumans. And we're looking forward to more along those lines. I was very moved myself by my participation in this Applied Futures Lab exercise. and Applied Futures does work with the Department of Defense, the Secret Service. Many entities across the United States have used the services of the Applied Futures Lab. And I encourage people to think about how this could apply in your area. Our next speaker is Lee Hong Yi from Singapore. And kind of like Cindy, he's coming from another side to say, okay, how can we have a new approach to government services? So Hong Yi, I'm very pleased to introduce you. I think most of you know that I'm originally from Singapore, and it's really a pleasure to feature Singapore's groundbreaking work. Go ahead, Hong Yi.
Hi, yes, give me 1 second. I'm trying to get the screen sharing to work. Let's see if I can get this. All right,
Yep,
can you guys see this?
Yes.
Cool. All right, thanks, Malin. So hi everybody, my name's Hong, and I head up a software engineering team in the Singapore government, basically. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about like how we essentially like try to run hackathons, and we try to like go around breaking down government bureaucracy and getting tech solutions built in the public sector space. So yeah, so this is who we are. Our team is about 100 people. We're about half software engineers, and then the remaining half is spread amongst designers, product managers, corporate functions, things like that. And this is some of the stuff that our team has built. So you can see that there's a whole bunch of products, like way more products than you should have given our size. That we are trying to fix that. But there's a wide range of things here. So you have sort of a bunch of general purpose products that people in the government use. So there's something like go.gov.sg, which is just link shortening but for the government. We have FormSG, which is Google Forms for the government. And then we have a few more like specific tools. So you have something about Redeem SG, if you see here on the top right. That's a voucher distribution system that the government uses to give out money to families and things like that. And I'll be talking a bit more about that, as well as like some very, very specific like niche cases. So for example, we built vaccine.gov, which is the COVID vaccination sort of like platform for Singapore, as well as Parking SG, which is an app to pay for street parking. So in Singapore, instead of using parking meters or coupons or whatever other system you might use, you just have an app and you use that to pay for street parking. So we built a whole bunch of stuff essentially. And this is interesting for us because it turns out to be actually it's quite like it took a while to get here. So when I first started out in government, I joined government about 9 years ago, and like I think for the first 3 or 4 years, it didn't really get much done. And for those of you who worked in government or worked with government before, you know how difficult it is to push things through. But yeah, we managed to push quite a lot through, and a big part of that is because we do hackathons. It's not just it's a sort of term you've seen quite a lot, but this is not just a small thing. This is not just an event we do once a year. But if you look here, I think like about half our products nowadays, if not more actually, a lot of the newer products are all from hackathons, come from the hackathons we run every year. So it is a sort of major part of our ideation and sort of like product design process. So these are just to give you an overview of like the kinds of products that we put out here. So we have go.gov.sg. It's a link shortener. Basically, you paste in a URL and you get a really nice short like go.gov.sg/ whatever link that you can share with people very easily. And very importantly, you get a QR code that people can scan. And in Singapore, if you go around anywhere and you look at posters on the side, subway station and things like that, go.gov links are everywhere. We've got over 300 million 300 million clicks on links in Singapore from the public, which is not a lot by American standards, but it's huge given Singapore's only like 5-6 million people. We have Postman. Postman again came from a hackathon. It is very simple. The government as with all large organizations, the government has to send out mass messaging. Sometimes this messaging is email, sometimes this messaging is by SMS, sometimes it's by Telegram or WhatsApp. It's a system to do so, and we've sent out 72 million messages on it, across 40 different government agencies. So finally, and we have Redeem SG, and so Redeem SG I think is just sort of talk about the magnitude of the kind of problems that we managed to get into. So Redeem SG is really simple. Well, it's not that simple, but basically it's a digital voucher distribution system. So the government wants to, so one of the main functions of government is to give out money to particular groups when they need it. But it turns out that's really, really hard, because it turns out if the government wants to give out, let's say, sort of like a voucher booklet for like $100 to buy groceries or whatever they need to buy, families need to buy. Distributing that booklet for $100 costs the government $5. Just to print, distribute, like, send it out to people. So if you're giving out $100 million, $5 million is literally just spent on the logistics of getting this out, and not talking about the logistics of getting sort of like distributing the money after that. Because what needs to happen is, for every like community, like for every like cluster of restaurants in Singapore which we accept these vouchers or something like that, they have to like collect the vouchers internally. They send one rep to get them all together. Then that person has to go to like the regional area, and in the regional area, all the different sort of like restaurateurs need to come and like collect those vouchers together, which then goes to the community center. Then the community center needs to give money to the regional reps, who need to give money to the community reps, who need to give money down to the individual restaurant owners. By the time, if you accept a government voucher, by the time you see actual money in your pocket for a merchant, it's often like 2 months later, which is really hard for a lot of these like cash flow strapped organizations. With Redeem SG, this happens instantly. So we managed to get away that the government just, you spend a digital voucher, you scan the QR code, it's done. Money's in the bank account the next day, which is a pretty big game changer. I think that Singapore, we have run 2 going on to 3 campaigns on the system so far, totaling about like $300 million on the platform. So that's the products we built out of this. And the reason I'm talking about this is because the way we do this is by running a hackathon. Basically, for the month of January, what we do is we pause all non-critical work on the team. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a bit of echo. Sorry, is that better?
I think so. Go ahead.
All right, cool.
Now it's better, yeah.
All right, thank you. And so for the month of January, we pause all non-critical work. This is what the timeline looks like roughly for 2022. And then we spend the whole month exploring new product ideas. So for the first week, we don't actually build anything yet. For the first week, we just go out and then we explore and meet with different government agencies. We go visit their offices, we go talk to schools, we go talk to the Port Authority, we go talk to like hospitals, we talk to the Ministry of Manpower, and just like really understand all the different problem statements that people face. Then we come back, we pitch ideas, we form teams, and by the end of the month, we have a big hackathon finale. We see that in the bottom right, where we invite like various government leaders from different departments and different ministries to come and like listen in, and people pitch their ideas. And these are not just ideas that are being pitched. I want to be clear. This is not an ideation workshop. This is not a business plan competition. This is a hackathon, which means that by the end of the hackathon, you have working prototypes that actually a lot of times have actual users already. Like by the end of 3 weeks of building. So it's a very like sort of focused time where people get together and build something. So yeah, for 2022, we had 200 different pain points, 60 different project ideas, and finally getting down to sort of final final projects is 21 product prototypes and pitches for 2022. And this is a big deal. The reason why I think our products have managed to be good so far is because we cheat. We don't just pick one idea and then we try to do it well. We go and like we find 200 different ideas, filter that down to 60 potential projects, and then take only the 20 something most successful ones. And that's how we have impact. So yeah, you can see here we do learning, like as I was mentioning earlier, we do learning journeys. We meet with people, and this even when we're doing COVID stuff, like they would just share. And then so here I think we Chung, the person in the middle there, I can't remember what agency they're from, but basically like the whole team will just tune in and like just ask them about their problems. Like as an officer, as a live. This could be really big stuff. It could be like, oh yes, we need to digitize our entire national record system for vaccines or something. It could be really small stuff. It could be really just mechanically, like as a teacher every day, when I need to input my students' records, like the system is really slow and clunky, and like it causes me to waste a lot of time. So yeah. If you guys want to see some of the problem statements, like you can feel free to go take a look at them. So there's a QR code, you can scan it, you can type in the go.gov link. I'll leave this on screen for a little bit. But you can see, yes, these are like 200 different problem statements that we gathered from across the Singapore government, and some are big and some are small, but it gives you sort of an idea of the scope of exploration that we sort of get into in order to really understand this. So yeah. So we'll go out, we'll go to export, we'll go get our problem statements. Then we'll come back, we'll do a design workshop. We, markers and paper and just sort of like sketching things out and doing prototypes. And then finally, when we finish building everything at the end of it, we have a finale where we go on stage and we present all the stuff. And, of the products that come out of it, I can show you. These are products in 2020, and out of 28 projects in 2020, 7 of them became live projects that we launched in the end. So if you look here on the left, the ones highlighted in blue are the ones we ended up launching. You got normal government apps like you would say Postman earlier, and Ready MSG we showed, but we also have like something a bit more social. So one of the things that came out of the hackathon was this sort of like little web game called Okay or Not, and it was not even a game. It was more to sort of like it was sort of an opinion survey that showed you how your opinions compared to other people's opinions. Like for example, like one of the things would be questions would be like, is it racist to assume that Chinese are good at math, for example? Is it okay for someone to say this to a Malay couple? And it's not meant to judge, it's not meant to say it's right or wrong. It's just meant to show you that this is how you feel, and this is what the opinions of everyone else is. And you can see it's a wide range of stuff. In 2021, we had again 20 projects, and one of the apps here I want to show you is this thing called Handsy. This is again completely out of left field. Basically, it's a simple like web game for the elderly to train their hand-eye coordination. And the idea here is that you just have little like hong bao, like the bread packets showing on screen, and then we use computer vision to just see that and you're supposed to just grab them with your hands using your webcam. And it's a really simple app. It's not really what you would call a government service, but the idea is that this is something that could help the elderly train their hand-eye coordination. And for 2022, yeah, we had a whole bunch of apps as well. And let me see here. We've launched, if you look at the stuff on the left, Who Dis, that's what I'm going to talk about later, the OGP design system, Cloud City, Resolve SG, Cal SG, like these all become actual production systems that we launch. So yeah, to give you a sense of like what an app out of a hackathon looks like, I'm going to end with an example of Check Who. So Check Who is a really simple app. The idea here is that when you get a call from someone claiming to be a government officer, you can verify who this is. So as a government officer, you sign into Check Who just using your government email address. We send a code to your government email account. You just sign in, and you register that you are going to call someone at this time. You are Ben Tan, an investigation officer from the police, and you are going to call a person at this time for this reason. And what we do is we then send that notification. We then, prior to your call, send a little notification to the user using their government ID app. So in Singapore, we have this thing called SingPass, where everyone has a government ID app, and we send a notification to you, and we let you know that, hey, the police will be calling you at this time for this reason, and you can tell because it's an official government app that that's a real notification, it's not spam. And this is something we built and launched within 3 weeks. It's fairly simple and fairly straightforward. But you can imagine that, like, in this day and age with all the scam calls and like spam stuff that gets about, something like this really helps, and it stops people from getting taken advantage of. So yeah, what's coming next? What we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out how to scale up. We're trying to get to a stage. Right now, we're just doing this within the team, and we have we have some people from other agencies come in and join us. But we're trying to get to a stage where it's something that's not just within the government, but something that's participatory with the general public. We want to get to a stage where solving public sector problems is something that everyone has the opportunity to do. That maybe not in maybe you don't want to do a career in the government, maybe you don't want to quit your your current discipline and go work in public sector, go work in public service. But you have an idea and you think something could be better and you want to do it, and that's what we're trying to get to. So yeah, that's what we're going on to next. Sorry, that's it from me, Malin. I know I must have run over time. I apologize.
Oh, no. That's fascinating stuff. In fact, there are quite a few questions in the chat. If you could take a
Oh
look.
yeah. Of course.
Who supports the solutions you finally launch? Ania from Bangladesh asks. Is it your core team, the hackathon, or a vendor that you bring in?
Yeah, we support our own products, so we don't outsource our product development at all. Like, we do everything ourselves. We've tried to hand off products to other teams to support, but it turns out just not to be very efficient. Like, when you try to hand off, these kind of software projects to other people in government, you end up spending we've tried it a few times before. You end up spending like a whole year trying to do the handoff, and actually you realize the handoff didn't happen very well, so you end up supporting it anyway. We've just concluded that it's just not worth the time to hand off. So we just end up running and growing teams and building things, and the more and more things there are to do, the bigger our team gets and the more things we build. Yeah, as long as there's still users, we keep growing our products.
Great. Maya asks, this is great stuff. What are your licensing standards and coding environment? And Maria, if you want to actually speak up, it's fine for you to speak too. Okay, go ahead, Hong.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, licensing standards, we open source as much as we can. We don't, I mean, we're a government agency. We don't make profit from any of this, and it doesn't make sense for us to start a business selling software. It takes a lot of time and effort, beyond having the software in order to make money of it. So we just don't bother. And so, yeah, it's open source as much as possible. People are free to use it. We want people to use it. Our goal is to not have this not just work in Singapore, but if we build a tool for digital forms, actually that could be useful for anyone in the world, which would be very nice. Our usual participants in hackathons are everyone on our team, but then we do invite people from elsewhere. So everyone on the team participates, but then we invite people from Facebook, some people from Google, and some other tech companies in Singapore, and just our friends of the team who have talked and want to spend some time hacking on something cool that they can present to the ministers. Yeah, that's our participants. We are trying to get to a stage where we are getting to the rest of the public service, and then if we get other public service agencies joining us, maybe we will start going to the general public as a whole. Yeah.
So for me, this is wonderful. Joseph, did you want to have a question? And then perhaps after that, Peter can make a comment.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this service in Brazil, where Brazil took over the Uber app and said that instead of 20% of the money going outside of the country, we'd rather use a governmental service and give that money directly to the taxi drivers so that there's no cut at all. Any comments, any ideas from your side here?
Yeah, I mean, so I've considered this. We talked about this a while ago, actually. I mean, the problem with Uber is, how do you prevent Uber from becoming its own monopoly, once it's successful, right? That was this whole consideration. Because the problem with the taxis before was that there was a bit of a monopoly and therefore got uncompetitive, and Uber, once it's successful, and it is in a lot of cities, there's no reason why it would stay competitive, like once it has to stop fighting for customers. We discussed this idea of like there are different ways you could regulate this. So for now, we've decided not to do anything, but I can list the options that we considered. One is just build our own government app to do this, just build it, create it, free for taxis, we run it. That's one option, but turns out Uber, as much as for all the hate they get, they do work, and they do quite good work, and it's non-trivial to do routing algorithms and run the ops and do all that. So, they say they take a cut, but 20% sales referral cut just for running the operations, I think it's pretty reasonable in my opinion. Two is we considered another approach where you enforce interoperability, meaning that rather than saying the government takes control of the app, what you say is that the apps have to share data with each other. So there's Uber and Lyft and whoever is. In theory, what you could do is you can mandate it such that they have to share data with each other, so that they have to, so that Lyft could send calls to Uber drivers. That's fairly aggressive. The more conservative approach that we did take, and this is actually something that we did common sense wise, is we prevent sort of like monopolistic terms in the licensing in the agreements with the drivers. So, for example, one of the things that the companies will try to do, again, this is what businesses do, is they will try to make sure that, like, if you drive in Singapore, it's Grab. If you drive for Grab, you have to only drive for Grab, and you can't drive for anyone else, which is, again, anti-competitive. And on top of that, they said if you drive for Grab and you rent a car, you have to rent it from Grab Rentals. You can't rent another car, and you have to rent the car from us. Again, anti-competitive. And so we decided to intervene at that level. So you keep the market contestable. So in Singapore, there's Gojek, Grab, Tada, and like one or two others. And so we have avoided sort of heavy-handed intervention, but we have put in this sort of like more traditional sort of antitrust kind of measures in place. Yeah.
Thank you, Hong. Peter Fagerström from from Finland, living in Estonia, mentions that they have something like this in Estonia. Peter, would you like to say a few words?
I could. So of course, Estonia is one of the most prominent startup countries in the world, and there is a lot of Estonia and Singapore cooperation already going on, and more, I suppose, in the talks as well. But here, there is really a culture of hackathons. So hackathons solve basically everything in society, and it's accepted form of development of society. So ministries set challenges and work with the private sector and public
awesome.
teams and private teams. And then they even have I've mentioned already Accelerate Estonia, where they talk about like moonshots. So how can we disrupt the public sector, and what does the public sector need to do to change laws and governments and structures to be able to get great ideas in? So I'll post a link to the program in a few seconds.
Oh, lovely! Yes, I would love to see that.
So there is a lot of things happening, I would say, in the Nordics in general with this, but in the Baltics and especially in Estonia. So more than happy to have a call and talk about this with anybody interested as well.
Would love to see it. Would love to see it.
Most of my time in Tallinn, Estonia at the moment. So and both Joseph and Malin visited us here this summer. So talking about these things as well.
Kate Wilson, would you like to make some remarks, and then we'll move on to Lynn Wells about Puerto Rico. Kate. Kate Wilson is the CEO of DIAL, the Digital Impact Alliance, which is funded by the UN Foundation. And
yeah, I believe I met with some people from DIAL before, but yes.
Kate?
Sorry, I was having problems getting back to the right screen. We're trying to, I sent Hangi a separate note and would love to connect with a colleague who just spoke as well, trying to document how different countries are doing this to share, because each country is trying to figure this out, right? Like, how are they both establishing their digital public infrastructure, and then how are they going to run locally developed applications on top of that then are built by the local ecosystem, and trying to figure that out. So we're taking a crack at also trying to document these stories. So would welcome joining the conversation you just offered. We work quite closely with Estonia as well, and would love to kind of drive that. We'd love to drive that as well.
Thank you, Kate. Hong, do you have any concluding remarks?
No, not at all. I mean, thanks everyone for your interest. I'm happy to share more about this. If anyone's interested, just feel free to drop me a note. lhy@open.gov.sg, or you can just look up our website. But yeah, thanks everyone, and I'm excited to see what other people what we do with this.
Oh, I see that Yolanda has a question. Please, Yolanda, go ahead.
No, just to compliment on Kate's comment, I think, Hon, thank you for this amazing presentation. I joined a little bit late because I'm in mission right now, actually, in Djibouti, Africa. And just to, I think it's worth it to have you sharing with us within the GovStack advisory group this experience. Singapore already has a place in the advisory group, so I will coordinate with you once we agree among the partners to have you as a guest and share this experience.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Great. Okay, now we're down to the home stretch. Thank you, Hong Yi. Thank you, Yolanda. Yolanda was CIO of Mexico before she joined the ITU as their lead for GovStack. There are four entities involved with GovStack. Nellie Loss, who is our chairman, cannot be here, but she reminds me to say, GovStack has 4 entities: ITU, Dial, Estonia, and Germany at the moment. And I very much hope that Singapore can be in that list down the road. Okay, so now Lynn Wells, our vice chair of the People-Centered Internet, will be speaking about the engagement that we have been having with the US territory of Puerto Rico over the last 4 years. In fact, Puerto Rico was our very, very first project, which we had the opportunity to write the digital recovery plan for Puerto Rico after the hurricanes Maria and Irma. And now with Hurricane Fiona, the sense of urgency for really getting something done is great. And I think you'll find what Lynn is going to share with us very relevant. Over to you, Lynn. You're muted.
And thanks very much. I'm having trouble sharing, so if you could you flip the slides?
I'll share the slides. You just keep talking, I'll share.
Yep. So what I want to talk about, a little different than what's on the agenda, which rather than just Puerto Rico and cybersecurity, I'd like to talk about Puerto Rico and a cyber secure internet resiliency. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, so the problem is that there is no reliable, resilient internet in Puerto Rico now. Even without the natural disasters, the internet is unreliable, there's limited bandwidth, the power is unstable, the equipment's outdated, a lack of resources, and cybersecurity is nowhere priority. But there's a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars flowing in to upgrade Puerto Rico's internet. But part of the problem is many of the remote communities may not benefit fully from this. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to find a way to focus on building a resilient internet in a remote community that could serve as a model, not just Puerto Rico, but elsewhere in Latin America and the Caribbean. Next. So there are 3 interlocking projects I'd like to talk about today, actually proposals. One is to improve the resiliency of the internet. 2 is to tie together with the GCTC, which was the National Institute of Standard Technology Global Cities Team Challenge. And this also links to the Department of Commerce effort called TOP, the Opportunity Project. And then third, possibly bring the ITU's Partner to Connect project we heard about on Sunday on the PCI community call. So the enhancing the internet resiliency, the basic point here is nothing about us without us. Nunca sobre nosotros sin nosotros. Essentially, this is something we've learned in the tribal resource center work that the PCI has done with the Internet Society Foundation. All the solutions are going to have to be co-developed with the community, and cybersecurity has to be included, especially in Puerto Rico's case. But one of the things we found here is power is key. If the grid is not stable, go to microgrids with renewables. There's a really interesting example out of Fiona, out of Ian in Florida, of the community called Babcock Ranch, which basically was designed with renewables, lots of solar panels, actually run by Florida Power and Light, that kept the community up and running even when most of the rest of the area was down. Ideally, you do this with cooperatives. These are expensive, so probably initially it'll require subsidies, but again, we've seen 5 years after Maria and Irma, the Puerto Rico grid still collapsed right after Fiona, so something different has to be done. The global team, excuse me. The global team's challenge with the National Standard Technology, what they're trying to do is to encourage smart city and Internet of Things stakeholders to develop and deploy solutions that are standard-based, replicable, scalable, interoperable, and provide way ahead. principal focuses on cyber physical systems. So this is cyber physical systems, things like generators and things that are tied to the internet through SCADA systems and all that. The idea is, how do you apply digital supply chain, digital capabilities on the microgrids, a model for local resilience to global challenges. The top project is basically a Department of Commerce, actually a Census Bureau project, with 12-week sprints to actually move fairly quickly. The Puerto Rico project focuses on, we're trying to do an improvement infrastructure, not just improve the infrastructure, but develop an infrastructure for improvement that can go forward. And then the Partner Connect Digital Coalition Opportunity is something the ITU is doing to foster meaningful connectivity and digital transformation globally. Next slide, please. So, and there's a lot of time, we don't have much time left. So basically, we're trying to approach digital opportunities with 5 phases. First of all, explore the opportunities, figure out where the resources are coming from, how do you govern it, how do you then choose the technology? It's never the first entry into the process. And then how do you implement it? How do you keep the systems running once they've been implemented? It's got to be end-to-end. People are always more important than technology, and try to coordinate, synchronize, and integrate across silos. Next slide. So just quickly, what is resilience? We're defining it here as coping capacity plus adaptability. NIST, National Institute of Standard Technology, has 4 phases: anticipate, withstand, recover, which we're calling coping capacity, and then adapt. And the critical piece is, in order to wind up better afterwards, you have to be able to adapt to the new post-disaster normal. The 3 types of resilience: a cultural resilience, is the organization willing to fight; an operational resilience, where your networks and systems support it, you have the cash flow to carry through; and the infrastructure resilience is, how do you understand the interdependencies among the infrastructures on which you depend. Next slide. In Puerto Rico, working with the community, we've selected 3 communities to look at. They're largely in the mountains, Lares in the west, Otakovas in the center, and Coamo in the south, which has also got the coastal interactions, and the University of Puerto Rico at Calle will be the coordinating body. Next slide. What this is trying to do, first of all, is understand your community needs, but we're focusing first on a resilient community connectivity hub in each municipality. There's lots of robustness. Then the idea, and this idea is to keep situational awareness to the community leadership and the emergency responders. Integrate stable power in the design from the very first, prototype and test it, and then train, maintain, and build capacity at each stage going forward. Once we get the community hub in place, the next phase will be community centers, kind of like satellite hubs, and key opportunities there in cooperative pharmacies and supermarkets, because frankly, they have a commercial incentive to keep the networks up, either to keep the food frozen or to keep the pharmaceuticals cool. And then after that, we'll look at extending the capabilities as much as time and money allow to the rest of the community. And there's some very innovative, low-cost building networks that, like our partner Athea has been doing a lot with. So we'll look at those options. Next slide. In terms of the GCTC and the top, in the Census Bureau, which is a remarkable asset that most people don't realize just how much data work the U.S. Census Bureau does. And so it's something to be tapped into going forward. GCTC is basically a smart cities initiative. The circle on the right is hard to read, but it's got all the pieces you'd expect to find of things like bandwidth and infrastructure and wireless connectivity and things like that. What we're trying to do is look at the resilience of cyber physical systems in Puerto Rico. Again, meaning generators are tied to the internet, pumps, things like that. And taking the digital capabilities, applying them to microgrids as a model for building local resilience, but then expanding through the PCI's theory of change into global change. Start locally, build globally. It leverages the Opportunity Project, which I mentioned is 12-week developmental sprints to work collaboration between technologists and community advocates. And how do you rapidly design digital solutions for public good? We're going to focus first on the secure microgrids with distributed renewable energy. and then pick a community or maybe two, design a local power grid, which could fit very nicely in with the previous project. We could do a second sprint that would focus either on more communities or promoting entrepreneurship and education. And this can tie into Char Palante's Enterprising Islands Initiative. And then there's also something called the Cybersecure Manufacturing Innovation Initiative Institute, SIMANI, which could then promote cybersecure manufacturing. So there are lots of opportunities in this partnership. Next slide, please. ITU as the partner to Connect Digital Coalition. I just have a picture there of Doreen Bogdan-Martin. We're so happy she'd been elected as the Secretary General-elect, take office in January. The P2C is a multi-stakeholder alliance that's designed to foster meaningful connectivity and transformation. It focuses on, but not limited to, the hardest to connect communities. And it's really closely connected with various UN technology and digital initiatives. To promote access, adoption, value creation, acceleration. It gathers pledges. And right now they have hundreds of pledges, billions of dollars in 4 types: programmatic, policy, advocacy, and financial. An example, the Conrad Foundation is programmatically pledged to bring 100 youths together over the next 5 years. What this does was ties the foundation together with Microsoft in the same database, which now could link to governments and other partners. Great opportunities for collaboration. By the way, one of the advocacy area can bring in research, so you can tie in the universities. The next slide, please. Cyber resilience, just point out you want to wind up stronger at the end. And last slide, please. Okay, so the integrated approach is sustainable resilience, coordinate, synchronize, and integrate across stovepipes. So bring the people, organizations, processes together, but you want to tie, for example, power to communications, because communications feeds back into power, and then link to transportation, because that's how the power lines get repaired. Leverage digital supply chains, focus on community-based approaches. The cyber physical systems and the IoT can be rapidly developed, and then the P2C can tie in a whole batch of UN partners, donors, government. And cybersecurity has got to be thought of this from the beginning. It can't just be an afterthought. Lynn, over to you.
Lynn, what a masterful presentation. And it really shows.
I have to go off the camera.
Lynn, we can't hear you. Go ahead. Were you speaking?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So it ties this entire narrative of the 2 hours together, that at the beginning, we spoke about the ITU and Doreen Bogdan, and then the Kazom from UNDP talked about digital public infrastructure and digital public goods. And she brought up a question which Lynn's presentation begins to answer. Kazom's question is, how can the private sector be involved? And this is the work of the people-centered internet. It's much easier to involve the private sector in real projects, on the ground projects that involve them rolling up their sleeves and working out how to participate. And that's what we are working with the US Department of Commerce. Many people are concerned about the tech giants in the United States, but the US Department of Commerce, potentially as a proposal from People-Centered Internet, is saying, we could do some on-the-ground work in Puerto Rico. Instead of the digital recovery plan for Puerto Rico recovering to yesterday, let's recover to tomorrow. What is the electrical grid of tomorrow? What is the cybersecure infrastructure? What are the new kinds of jobs, the new kinds of abilities that we can tap, like Cindy Kuhn talked about in her cool abilities? The ability for governments to do hackathons with ordinary people is fully in the spirit of the people-centered internet. Lynn and I share this fascination with Dunkirk. The miracle of Dunkirk was that the big ships couldn't take the soldiers off, but the little ships did. And 250,000 British soldiers were taken off the French coast back to the UK buy little ships. And the spirit of the internet is a spirit of little ships. It's how the internet spread. The internet was not spread by the UN or the World Bank. It was by the people. And so we stand for by the people, of the people, for the people. And I hope that, this has been a good recap of why we do digital cooperation and diplomacy. We do it because the most sustainable future is the one that everybody has a vested interest in. And when that happens, we can move beyond the issues of today into working together to have a better tomorrow for future generations. And on that note, I'm going to say that our chairwoman, Nelly Losk of Estonia, she's the tech envoy of Estonia, and we're very happy to have her as our second chair after our inaugural chair, Vince Cerf. Nelly Losk sends her greetings to us all. She was supposed to chair this meeting, but things got tricky in India and she couldn't come on. So that's life in the internet age. And thank you all for joining us today. And we hope this was valuable time spent, well spent.
Thanks, Malin.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, everyone. So nice to see you all. Bye.
Bye.
Malin?
Yes.
Yeah, can you check your WhatsApp, please?
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay, I forgot Yusuf.
I talked to him, so just please send him an email.
Okay.
Explaining what happened. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Okay, everyone. Bye bye. I'm leaving. Thank you, Dorothy, for putting your name.
Oh, my pleasure. As always, a great meeting. Congratulations. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I will finish the meeting now.